And this week we're looking at the attribute of, it's been called, the immutability of God. That God does not change. That He's endless and He remains the same. And He's not subject to variation or change. This is a very famous passage about this attribute, and we're going to learn from the passage three things: what we are, what we need, and it also will hint at how we can get it. What we are, what we need, and how we can get it. Now, what we are. We didn't print or read the whole passage. It's a longer passage than this. It's 28 verses. However, the first 11 verses are painful to read. So, for example, notice some of the man's characteristics. Verse 2, I am in distress. Verse 4, the last part, I forget to eat my food. Verse 4, the first part, my heart is blighted, which probably means hopelessness. It means my heart is the seat of the soul, and the personality is blighted. Actually, verse 7, which wasn't printed here, he says, I lie awake. I have become like a bird alone on a roof. So, let's go back over them. Grief, loss of appetite, hopelessness, sleeplessness, a sense of isolation. And many of you recognize these as the signs of clinical depression. But what's causing it? Well, what has triggered it? And the answer is, you can see it in verse 3, my days vanish like smoke. Verse 4, I'm withered like grass. And actually, verse 11, he goes back to this image and says, my days are like the evening shadows, and I wither like grass. Now, in the Bible, grass means something that's here today and gone tomorrow. It's temporary. It's ephemeral. It's over and done fast. This man is experiencing the hopelessness and disorientation from a sense of his radical temporariness, his radical impermanence, his radical transience and brevity. He sees that nothing lasts, nothing remains. Everything he wants, everything he loves, everything he enjoys is going to slip or is slipping out of his fingers no matter how tightly together he holds them. Everything changes. Nothing lasts. That's the reason why Isaac Watts puts it in the very famous hymn that we often sing. Time like an everlasting stream. Time like an ever-rolling stream bears all its sons away. They fly forgotten as a dream dies at the opening day. I've really flubbed that poem. Let me do it again. This is "Oh God, our help in ages past," that hymn, and one of the stanzas goes, "Time like an ever-rolling stream bears all its sons away. They fly forgotten as a dream dies at the opening day." When you're young, when you're a kid, summers seem endless. By the time you're a young adult, you always say, "Boy, that summer went pretty fast." And by the time you get a little beyond being a young adult, you feel like you're on a toboggan without any brakes. When you're young, change seems like zest. It seems like the spice of life. But as time goes on, you realize changes are fate. And changes actually are doom. Now, how this man got it, what triggered this sense of existential loss, the feeling of the brevity of life? Everything is fleeting away. I'm losing everything. Everything goes away. Well, what triggered it probably is an illness, because in verse 3, when he talks about my bones burning like glowing embers, that could be a fever. And down in verse 23 and 24, it says, he broke my strength, he cut short my days. Do not take me away, O my God, in the midst of my days. He's probably very ill. He might be dying. He thinks he might be dying. And he's not an old man. And as a result, the sense of the brevity of life, how fast things go by, has hit him. But the sickness didn't create the condition, it just revealed it. This is our condition. Some years ago, many years ago, when I was a kid, I watched a Twilight Zone. In fact, it was from 1959. It was in the first year, Rod Serling's Twilight Zone. The name of the episode was "And When the Sky Was." You can look it up. And it's a story of three guys who are pilots, or astronauts, or pilots, and they're in a plane, and the plane disappears. Everybody thinks they're gone, and then it reappears, and I guess either crashes, but they're all rescued. And all the newspapers say, 3 men rescued. And one of the men is injured, so he goes to the hospital. And the way the story unfolds then is, 2 of the 3 men go into a bar. And the first man says, oh, it's my mother's birthday. So he goes into the phone booth and he calls her up, and his parents say, who are you? What are you calling for? We don't have any son. And he goes back and he says to the first guy goes back and says, they acted like I didn't exist. And I feel kind of funny right now. And he goes to the restroom or something and he disappears. And the second guy says to the waiters and waitresses, what happened to that guy that I came in here with? What happened to that guy that you were serving? And they said, you came in alone. And he looks down at his paper and it says, 2 men rescued. It's Twilight Zone, of course. And of course the second guy goes to the hospital to the third guy and he says, what's going on? And he looks in the mirror and he can't see a reflection. And then he runs out the door and he disappears. And the third guy says to the nurses, where did that guy go that you brought in here? And the nurses said, we didn't bring any guy in here. And he looks down at the paper and says, man rescued. So the point is, and then he disappears. And every time somebody disappears, nobody can remember that they were ever there. And I remember watching that in a room. I don't remember who else was in the room. I remember watching as a kid and thinking, this is horrible. I was creeped out. And I said, boy, this is horrible. And some adult there said, that's just life. And in the very next Psalm, Psalm 103:15, we read this. As for man, his days are like grass. He flourishes like a flower of the field, and it is gone. The wind passes over it, and its place remembers it no more. And the fact is that, there probably is nobody in this room that will be remembered 100 years from now. And if there is, there's nobody in this room that will be remembered 1,000 years from now. We're all going to be forgotten. See, when you get a sense of the brevity of life, and it comes on you, you notice a few things. There's nothing better, for example, than a table full of happy members of a family, all sitting around the table, laughing and eating or whatever. And it's especially great if you're one of them. But you're going to lose, everybody there around the table is going to lose everybody else. You're either going to lose one another by fighting, or you're going to lose one another by moving, or you're going to lose one another by you dying away from them or them dying away from you until, in the book of Hebrews, there's a place where it says that Abraham, this is Hebrews 11, was looking for the city with foundations, whose builder and maker is God. The point is, there's nothing here, there are no foundations here, there's nothing you can rest in. It's all quicksand here, There is nothing you can rest in that is firm. Nothing is firm. See, everything is vanishing like smoke. Everything is vanishing like the evening shadows. Everything. You can't trust the physical. Look, your body is wearing away now, but the text says, which is true, even the mountains and the stars are going to be worn away by time. Even they're going to go away. So there's no physical foundation. There's no relational foundations. There's nobody that you can love that will not leave you or you leave them. There's no intellectual foundations. One of the scary things about New York is people in New York want to see themselves as in the cultural and intellectual mainstream. They don't want to be considered an extremist or something like that. They say, well, we know that, smart people now know this. All smart people know this. Well, listen, 60 years ago, look at what all the smart people were saying. Look at the publications of the Ford Foundation. Look at the New York Times editorial page. And there's all kinds of stuff that if you go back 60 years, they were saying that today we find embarrassing. Oh my gosh. And if you're 85 years old, your great-grandchildren or so will come to you and say, Grandmommy, Granddaddy, did you live back when everybody said that? And everybody believed that? And you say, well, yeah, honey, but that's people believed that back then. Oh, that's awful. Except, of course, when the little kid grows up and they're 85, their great-grandchildren are going to say the same thing. Because right now, whatever you think is intellectual bedrock will be gone. Things that you think all smart people now know are going to be laughed at. They're going to be embarrassing in another 50 years. There are no intellectual foundations. There are no physical foundations. There are no relational foundations. There's nothing that's firm. Everything is quicksand. There's nothing to rest in. There's nothing to rely on. That's what we are. That's what we are. Radically temporary, radically impermanent, radically transient. See? So what do we need? Point 2. Well, what I love about the Bible is, well, there are no theological essays. There's no abstracts. I love this about the Bible. Here is a very, very practical, live. This is a poem. The heading, by the way, we didn't print the heading, but most of the Psalms have headings, or a lot of them do. And the heading of this psalm says, "The prayer of an afflicted man." This is a man in trouble. This is a man in agony. This is a man in depression. And he's working through it. But notice what happens by the end. Do you see what happens at the end? He's coming out of it. He's getting confident. He's getting some assurance. And at the very end, it doesn't quite make it, but it comes very close to praise. It's very obvious that he's coming out. How did he do it? Did he go on a new diet? Did he change his wardrobe? Did he start to pamper himself? Did he work on his self-esteem? What did he do? I mean, those are the things we're told to do now, if you're down in a trough. No, you know what he did? He did theology. But it's not abstract theology. It's lived theology. It's applied theology. And he learned 2 theological truths. And these 2 theological truths will deal with the sense we have in our culture. And the sense that you will sometimes have, especially as you get older, that nothing lasts, everything's slipping out of your fingers. There's the 2 things that he deals with, and here's these 2 theological truths. The first one is that there is an unchanging God. It's down here in verse, especially down here at the very end. It says, "In the beginning you laid the foundations of the earth. The heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you remain." But then it goes on even further. It says, "They wear out like a garment, like clothing you will change them, and they will be discarded, but you remain the same, and your years will never end." It's not just that he goes on forever, but he's unchanging. There's no variation, James 1:17. Malachi 3:6, "I, the Lord, change not." Now, how can that be? And it's very hard for us to imagine that because we live in time, but here's the hint. In verse 25 it says, "In the beginning you laid the foundation of the earth." In the beginning, God already was there. In the beginning of what? Well, beginning is duration. In the beginning of duration, God was already there. That means he existed before time, and he exists outside of time. And one of the things that's been most helpful to me over the years is to understand the unchangingness of God and what that means. When you think of the unchangingness of God, it tends to sometimes make you think of something kind of static, but no. Think of it like this. Let's go back to Isaac Watts. Isaac Watts actually probably based that hymn, "O God, our help in ages past," to a great degree on this psalm. For example, does this sound like the psalm? One of his stanzas is, "Before the hills in order stood, or earth received her frame. From everlasting thou art God, to endless years the same." Sound familiar? Yeah, Isaac Watts. But let's go back to that other stanza where he says, "Time like an ever-rolling stream." Let's imagine time to be a river. And let's see it as a river going around the foot of a mountain between other mountains. So it's got a lot of bends in it. And imagine time is like that, and there are boats on the river. And none of the boats can see the other boats. Why? Well, because of the bends. But in the illustration, it's because this is time. And any boat upstream from you would be in the past. And any boat downstream from you would be in the future. But let's imagine that even though there's all these boats and they can't see each other and they're all in the time, they're ever-rolling stream, they all can see anywhere on the river. Let's imagine you can see the summit of the mountain. That there is a clear sight line from the top of the mountain down to any single spot on the river. And let's even say, since it's going like this, that every boat is equidistant from the summit. So if a person was standing on top of the summit, they could see every boat, even though the boats couldn't see each other. They'd be equidistant from the boat, each boat, even though the boats were not. They're all different kinds of distances from each other. That's how God relates to time. God is up here, and he looks down at time, the ever-rolling stream, and he sees it all happening at once. It's all present to him. Think of this. The things that you and I think of as having have happened, he's seeing now. The things that, as from our vantage point, will happen, he's seeing now. All moments are present to him. He sees them all at once. And that suddenly helps me. I hope it helps you see. So that's what it means that God is unchanging. He's outside of time. And what that means is, here's why he can't change. Why do you change? We change our character when we come under new influences. Or we change our minds when we come under we get new information. We say, oh, well, we better do that. But for him, all influences and all information he sees at once. So he couldn't change. So he's perfect. He can't get better, he can't get worse. Now, the idea that God does not change has an enormous number of implications. And let me just run down three. I don't think we can take too many, but just to show you, let me give you three. Over the years as a pastor, sometimes I had people come in. These are people who believed in God, and as far as they knew, they had a relationship with God, and they come in and they've done something. And they feel so guilty, and they feel so awful, and they can't believe they did it. They can't believe they did it. They had no idea they were capable of it. They're so ashamed. And they can't forgive themselves, and their lives are in ruins. And they come in, and almost always one of the things they'll say is, and I can't see how God could possibly love me now that I did this. And of course, you want to be sympathetic, and you are sympathetic. Of course, you know how they feel, but you have to say, you realize what you're seeing right now, when you look at yourself right now, you realize that you're actually not seeing your whole self. You're only seeing the present moment. You're actually seeing a tiny little slice of yourself. See, God sees you, and when God sees you, he doesn't just see all of your body, and he doesn't even see just all of your soul. He sees all of your history. And that means that when this awful thing happened, and I can't believe I'm capable of, you think that took God by surprise? When he put his love on you, he put his love on all of you. Only God knows you because he's unchanging, because he's outside of time, because he sees everything at once, because all moments are present to him. See? Only God can know you. You can't know yourself. You can't even know the tiniest little bit of yourself. You have no idea what you're capable of. You have no idea all the stuff that's in your heart ready to spring out later on. Good things and bad things, but God knows. And when God puts his love on you, he puts his love on all of you. He knows you. Don't think you somehow threw God a curve. You can't throw God a curve. Here's another implication, and that is his purpose and will. I've had plenty of people say, oh my word, now that I've done this and I've done that, I should have done that, and then I would have had that, and I should have done that, and I would have had that, and I should have done that, and then I'd be over there, and therefore my life is on plan B. No, it's on plan C. I think it's on plan D. I don't think there's a plan. But can you imagine, see, now that you understand who God is, can you imagine God, giving you a plan, then you do something and he says, oh my word, she did that? Well, now if she did that, she can't do that. Well, I guess I'm going to have her do, this is the best I can do for her now. See, whenever you imagine God, you're imagining God inside time, just as stuck in it as you are. Oh, you kind of have an idea that he's got foresight or something, that he knows the future. He's not. What do you mean? When somebody says to me, oh, God knows the future and he remembers the past, you're acting like he's here, that he's stuck in time like you are. What do you mean he remembers the past? The present, the past, the future, they're all the same to him. He sees them all at once. And the idea that you could do something and now he's got to put you on plan B or plan C as if you could give him new information, that's ridiculous. There is no plan B for your life. Do you understand that? There is no plan B. God sees it all. He's working on it. All things work together for good for those who God loves and are called according to his purpose. And I can't stay on this point anymore because we've got another sermon coming up on that whole subject. But because God's unchanging, he's not stuck in time. You can't throw him curveballs. Here's one last thing. How do you regard the Bible? I know two kinds of people that are both feel that they really can't take the Bible totally seriously. First of all, there's people who say, the biblical authors, I'm sure were wonderful people in their day, but they're old people, ancient people. They lived in ancient times. There's all kinds of strange things in the Bible. And a lot of it's just out of date. And there's this enormous distance between us and the biblical authors culturally. And, you just can't read it as if it's all authoritative. So, you can't take the Bible seriously or literally because it was written so long ago. That's one way of saying. But I know other people who would like to believe the Bible, but they read it, and they read these great stories about God doing great things in people's lives, and God coming into their lives and changing their lives, and they read stories of intimacy with God. And yet you really feel like, come on, admit it, that doesn't happen anymore. That would never happen to me. It can't. That was then, this is now. See, there's some people who don't want to believe the Bible because it's so old, and some people who would like to, but don't feel like they can because it's so old. And yet J.I. Packer, in his book, Knowing God, writes this. He says, it is true that in terms of space, time, and culture, the biblical authors and the historical epoch to which they belong are a very long way from us. But the link between them and us is not found at that level. The link between the biblical authors and us is God himself. For the God with whom they had to do is the same God with whom we have to do. In fact, exactly the same God, for God does not change in the least particular. How can we say this ancient book is relevant to us? Because it's the same God. The God speaking there has not changed. He doesn't change. The biblical author is dealing with that God, is dealing with the same God you have to deal with. It has not changed. I, the Lord, change not. You remain the same, and your years never end. See? Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. So the Bible's relevant, and you can't throw God a curveball. And it doesn't matter what you do. His love, and that gets us actually to what we need to see. Because I told you there's two theological truths that this man gets that pull him out. And the first is, there is an unchanging God. But that's not all. And here's the reason why. Frankly, it's not enough to really believe that there's a God up there who's unchanging in general. You also need to believe that he loves you, or you can't trust him. Two illustrations on this. For example, notice what he says. It's pretty striking when here at the end, near the end, where he says, in the beginning you laid the foundations of the earth, that's the mountains, and the heavens are the work of your hands, that's the stars. They will perish. You will discard them like a garment, but you remain the same. Now, you know how long the mountains have been around? Oh, let's go a little further. Do you know how long the stars have been around? The Big Bang was 13.7 billion years ago. Now, if you have a God who is so eternal and so everlasting that 13 billion years is like that, they wear out like a pair of old socks for you, how does that make you feel? It makes you wonder. It's a little bit like actually Psalm 8. It makes you wonder, like, why would he care about me? You know how long mayflies live? Class? Some species live as long as a day, but some species live as long as 30 minutes. After they're hatched, their lifespan's 30 minutes. This is why you don't give mayflies to your kids for pets. Because you say, today you give them, hey, here's your mayfly. Thank you, Daddy. The next day, Daddy, my pet died. And you say, yes, that's life. Go watch The Twilight Zone. I'm trying to show you no, you don't give a child a doll and then take it away in 30 minutes. How can you get attached to anything in 30 minutes? What's the purpose of it? And we're like mayflies to God. How could a God like that care about us? But we need to know it. It's not enough to trust God just to know he's unchanging. You've got to know he's unchangeable in his commitment and love to us. Right? I think I've made a case that I think it's not my case, and it's pretty irrefutable. There is nothing here to trust. There is nothing here that will not leave you. There is nothing here that will not give way. This is quicksand here. There are no intellectual foundations. There's no physical foundations, relational foundations. So God's our only candidate. God is the only one who, if you trust him, will never leave you. You can't trust him unless you know he loves you. How can you know he loves you? Let me explain, and that's the last point. First of all, Hebrews chapter 1 is one of the hardest passages in the Bible to read. It's Hebrews chapter 1 collects, this is in the New Testament, and it collects 7 passages from the Old Testament and reads them as being about Jesus, or being by Jesus, being said by Jesus. It's 7 passages. Now, they go by really fast when you read Hebrews 11, and virtually nobody does the kind of work, including me, by the way, until recently, because I never saw this until recently. Hebrews 1 goes by, and he says, to the Son, he says this, and the Son says this, and he goes back and pulls all these passages out of the Old Testament. And you read them and you say, okay, I think I get it. But you know what you should do is go back, reread the passages in the Old Testament and figure this out. In almost every case, what the Hebrews writer is doing is he's saying, these things said in the Old Testament, though had a truth at the horizon of their time, were pointing ahead to Jesus and the Messiah. Now, one of the 7 passages is this one. And actually he says in Psalm 102, he says about Psalm 102, this is the Messiah speaking, or this man is a type of the Messiah. This man is pointing forward to the Messiah. And when you reread all of Psalm 102, including the verses we don't have here, all 28 verses, and you say, wait a minute, what if I read this as if Jesus is speaking? It's astounding. It's astonishing. This psalm is pointing forward to someone else who was in agony, someone else who was dying, someone else who was being cut off in the middle of his years, in his youth, someone else who cried to God, and yet someone else who, after it was all done, his children live before God forever. Verse 28 is like a lightning bolt. Do you see it? See, verse 27 says the first theological truth. You remain the same and your years will never end. But verse 28 is the second truth we're looking for. He says, the children of your servants will live in your presence. Their descendants will be established before you. What? Now, first of all, the word presence here is the word for face. It's the Hebrew word panim for face. And it means relationship. And the word established is a word that denotes permanence. And if you put all the verses 25 to 28 together, this is what it's saying. The stars, the mountains are going to wear out. God is not permanently committed to them. He will discard them. But if you are his servant, if he puts his love on you, he is permanently committed to you. You will be in his presence forever. You have his love forever. He will, not even the stars in the mountains are everlasting. God is not permanently committed to them, but he is permanently committed to you, if you are his servant. Now, how can he know that? And the answer is, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, lost his everlastingness and became a finite human being who could be ended, and he was killed on the cross so that you could be everlasting. Well, how does that work? Here's how it works. Do you know that the gospel of Jesus and the gospel of the cross is actually a solution to the question of how God can stay unchanging to sinners? Listen to this question. How can God be unchanging to sinners? We've said God is unchanging in his character. Okay, what's his character? He's a loving God and he's a just God. He's unchangeably loving and unchangeably just, right? He loves us and he's a just God, right? How can he be both with you and me? Because we've rebelled, we've sinned. Do you see the challenge? See, there's only 2 things it seems like he could do. One is he could say, I'm going to punish you, which means he stays unchangeably just, but he's no longer unchangeably loving. He takes his love away. Or, the other thing he could do is he say, I'm going to be unchangeably loving, I'm going to be committed to you, but all the things that you've done wrong, I'm just going to kind of overlook the law. I'm going to overlook your sin, that's all right. I'm just, I'll just take you in anyway. In which case he's unchangeably loving, but not unchangeably just. How could God be both unchangeably just and unchangeably loving to you and me? And the answer is, Jesus Christ went to the cross and lost his everlastingness so we could have it. He died on the cross. He paid the penalty for our sins. So now God can come and look to us and say, you've been unfaithful to me, but I can be unchangeably faithful to you. And still just, unchangeably just. Why? Because Jesus died on the cross. And now I will love you no matter what. You might be fickle. You will change. You'll say, oh, Jesus, I'll do this for you. Oh, Lord, I'll do this for you. And you'll come and you'll go, but I'm going to love you till the end of time. I'm going to love you until the time's over. I'm going to love you till when the stars fall out of the heavens, I'll still be loving you. That's what the text says. Isn't that amazing? Jesus lost his everlastingness. He was cut off in the middle of his years so that we could be everlastingly loved. Now, there's a story. Let me tell you what this story. There's a story that I heard years ago in a sermon that really had an impact on me. And some of you have been, if you've been around here a long time, you know that those stories that I've heard in sermons like that tend to come up in the sermons over the years. It's about a lumberjack who comes into a grove of trees, and he knows he's going to be cutting them all down over the next few weeks. And he sees a mother bird making her nest in the tree. And he knows this is a disaster coming, because if she gets there, makes the nest, starts laying the eggs, that the tree's going to come down, and not only will she probably die, but all the babies and the eggs and all that. So what does he do? He goes over to the tree and he takes the flat of his axe, starts banging on the tree, and shakes the poor mother bird up. And she looks down. All she sees is this guy, just tormenting her. So she flits to another tree, starts to build a nest there. He follows her. Bangs on that tree until she can't stand it. Then she flits to another tree. He follows her again, and he bangs on that tree until finally she flies up to a high rock, and she starts building her nest there. And then he walked away because he knew she was safe. And the preacher said, do you know that every tree in this world is coming down? Every relationship, everything that you could possibly trust, your career, your friends, your intellect, everything is coming down. You must build on the rock. His oath, his covenant, his blood, support me in the whelming flood. When all around my soul gives way, he then is all my hope and stay. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. Is God right now being the lumberjack in your life? Is he smacking a tree, something in your life that you are building your nest in, but it's going to come down eventually anyway, and he's trying to get you to make Jesus your center, and to make Jesus the thing that you build your life on, not just a peripheral thing, not just a side thing. Is he playing the lumberjack right now? Don't get mad at him. Don't look down and say, why are you tormenting me? He cares unchangeably for you.
耶和华是我的牧者，我必不致缺乏。他使我躺卧在青草地上，领我在可安歇的水边。